Good evening, everyone. I am quite nervous, so just bear with me as we have a conversation about conflict resolution. I want to start out with a question, and the question is, what do you think, or what can be conflict? What is conflict? Yes. Yes.
A dispute.
A dispute, yes. A difference in opinion. The same thing. Any other ideas about what is conflict?
War.
War. Yes. Unwillingness to compromise. A misunderstanding. Any other ideas? Okay, so with that understanding of conflict, we know that conflict exists. It has existed forever. And the reason why it exists is because we're all unique. We have different opinions, we have different cultures, we have different ideas, we come from different backgrounds, and we will have differences of opinion. True? So conflict is something that will always exist. The question isn't necessarily how to get rid of the conflict. The question is, how do we deal with the conflict? Right? So just to think about it, all of us are different, and particularly in relationships, you don't go into a relationship maybe marrying somebody exactly like you. Maybe you wouldn't want to do that anyway, but but you don't marry somebody exactly like you. There's always something that's going to be different, and you'll have differences of opinions. And so in relationships particularly, what we're going for is the ability to manage those well, is the ability to resolve the conflict, to come to some understanding that you can get past that particular moment and live peacefully, right? We all like to like each other and love each other for the rest of our lives, so we have to do it in some particular way. So what I want to talk about, and the whole point there, is that conflict exists, it will always exist, and what you want to do is be able to manage that conflict. Now, we had a idea that conflict also means war. Whether you're talking about civil war, you're talking about world wars, or you're talking about wars in your house, there might be a war. But that's all because the conflict wasn't resolved. You went to another level of trying to resolve the conflict, which caused a war. And so that is where we don't want to go. We want to be able to manage conflict. Now, as Christians, I want to bring out a particular salient point that we want to be treated, we ought to treat others as we want to be treated. As followers of Christ, he gave an example of how we should treat other people. And that is what we should be striving for. It is something that, you know, when we think about how we're going to interact with our brothers, with our sisters, with our parents, with our spouses, our partners, whoever, we have to ask the question, how am I being Christ-like in this particular interaction? And I want to bring that out because I can tell you a lot of skills and tips to manage conflict, but if you don't have a value of treating people with respect and loving people, it still won't work. You have to have a basis of treating others and wanting to treat others with respect. And being Christian, I think that foundation and that desire should come from your relationship with God and how you see God in your life. I have two texts that I brought up. that I think might help make the point as I look for it on my phone. The first one is found in Proverbs 25, verse 11. And it says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." Interesting imagery. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. We have to be careful how we use our words. I don't think sometimes you realize how harmful our words can be. And in conflict, as you may escalate conflict or you're in conflict with someone else, if you're choosing to respect this person, you have to be careful about the words you use when you're speaking to them. I'll go into that and I'll talk about a little more scientific stuff, but I want you to think about your words. Not only the words, but how you use them. Your tone of voice, your body language, how you maybe ignore them, even in conflict. So your words, choose your words wisely, because they will determine what your relationship looks like. They will determine whether you continue the conflict. They will also determine whether or not you're able to resolve the conflict. So words fitly spoken are like apples of gold in setting of silver. The other text that I have, and I think this might be a little more, I don't know if you know this one, but it's found also in Proverbs 15, verse 1. It says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger." It says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger." I just told you that you're not able to avoid conflict, but you can definitely de-escalate conflict by watching the words and what words you use. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words is the other term, stirs up anger. So you have an opportunity to either de-escalate conflict or increase it or escalate it. And that's all by your choice of words and how you decide to respond. So we're moving just away from words, but even just your response. For example, you are talking about a certain, you're talking about food. What do I want to order off of the menu today? And your partner or your friend or whoever is asking you, "So do you think you want fries today?" And just because I see the fries right there, do you think you want fries today? And your response is, "What do you think, I'm a pig?" Where do you think that argument's gonna go? That's gonna automatically just that's gonna escalate conflict. You guys are gonna get in a fight, then you guys won't even eat anything and run out of the restaurant because he or she asked you whether you not want fries. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. A different response would have been, "You know what? I don't feel like fries today. Maybe I can have something else." Simple answer, but it didn't go into an argument. So being able to you think about your words and think about the way you respond is going to de-escalate the potential conflict that can happen in your relationships across the board. And I'm not even just talking about spousal relationship. I'm talking about any relationship. Friends, family, co-workers, your boss. Sometimes you won't even respond to your boss. You just roll your eyes and walk away because you don't want to get into a fight at work. You might lose your job. That's a different escalation. But being able to think about what you're going to say, what words you're going to say, is going to de-escalate and move you away from conflict. Now, in relationships, that's just kind of managing and keeping it at a low level. So in relationships, we want to stay away from, and this is, I just came from this training, so it's just fresh in my mind now, but we want to stay away from what John Gottman, who's a researcher on couples, calls the 4 horsemen. These are ways in which your relationship will start to go where you don't want it to go. So the 4 horsemen: criticism, right? In the middle of conflict, a lot of us like to criticize the other person. Criticism is labeling and making it about their character rather than about their behavior. So, in effect, you're saying the problem is you, and you are defective. So, for example, if you're upset about them not washing the dishes, you're gonna say, I don't know what's wrong with you, you don't even know how to put away dishes, right? So the problem didn't start about them not putting away the dishes, now the problem is them. You always, or you're the problem. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm really upset that you didn't put the dishes away. It's a totally different, you're focusing on the behavior rather than them. So you want to stay away from criticism. So that's one of the horsemen. The other horseman, which follows after criticism, is defensiveness, right? What do you mean I don't put away the dishes? I try all the time. What are you talking about? I always try to put away the dishes, right? So you start to get defensive, right? And that can start to cause problems. The other one is, but it's not my problem, it's your problem why the dishes aren't away. Another way of being defensive. So criticism is followed by defensiveness. The other one you want to avoid, and this gets increasingly worse, is the idea of contempt. Now, this is a position of saying, I'm okay, but you're not okay. This horseman arises from this feeling of superiority over the other, and it's a form of disrespect. So your response is almost condescending in what you say. And when you start to get contempt, you are getting into a place where it's harder to move away from that. You're starting to not like the person, if you know what I mean. So it's starting to get into a place where you're starting to distance yourself away from the person. And the last one is stonewalling. And stonewalling it happens because of maybe defensive, criticism, contempt, and that person gets so flooded with emotions and not knowing how to respond that they just totally ignore you. They totally walk away from you. They have no desire to engage you in any conversation, and they just shut down. And that is a problem in terms of conflict. And so those are the 4 that you want to stay away from, right? So anybody can name the 4. What? Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. These are the things that you want to stay away from in your conflicts. You don't want to criticize. You don't want to be defensive. You don't want to say things out of contempt or sometimes resentment. And you don't want to stonewall. You don't want to be in a position where you don't want to engage, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to resolve the conflict. If you walk away or you push the whole situation away, you're not going to resolve anything. So you need to be in a space where you can do that. So how do we then avoid these things? How do we fight fair so that we are able to get through the conflict and come to some type of resolution? That's where we're going. and hopefully we can get there. These ones are not necessarily from Gottman, but let's think about not yelling, raising your voice. You automatically create an environment that is not conducive to negotiation. You can't talk about things, you can't compromise, you can't work things out if you're yelling. You're creating a very hostile environment. So watch your tone of voice, watch the level of your voice. You don't want to yell at the person. That can also be very demeaning. Why are you yelling at me? That is very uncomfortable. So you want to create an environment where you can talk, where you can get to a place where you can start to work things out. Always start and end the conversation by affirming that you care about the other person. Sometimes we are so involved in trying to get our point across or trying to be right that we don't realize that we're not taking that person's point of view in mind. We're not tuning into what they might be saying or what they might be talking about, and so we don't affirm that we actually care about them. You can be in conflict and care about somebody, no matter how difficult that kind of sounds, but you can't be in conflict and care about something, and care about somebody. And being able to convey that throughout that conflict is going to be important. You know what? I hear your point, but I don't think I agree. This is where, I think we should go because this is how it makes sense to me. You've affirmed them, you've talked about, I hear your point, you've given them the opportunity to speak, but at the same time, you were able to convey what your difference of opinion was, respectfully, right? So that's what you want to be able to do. Be open to the idea that you've made a mistake, even if you're sure you did not. So, in Gottman stuff, this would be able to yield so that you can win, right? Sometimes you have to you should be able to be apologetic if you are wrong. Sometimes we realize that we're wrong and we're gonna pretend like we're right. We got this all right and we were absolutely wrong. You need to be open to the idea that you need to apologize or that you need to say sorry for something that you did wrong. Be open to the idea that you did something wrong. And this also says that you might have to even be wrong when you were right. And that really takes some discernment in that conversation to know where to go with that. But the whole point is that you have to be in what Christians might call in a space of humility. Be able to know that we all make mistakes. And if I can apologize for my mistake, then we are able to move past that. So it's a give and take, right? We have to be able to think about that. The other one is don't speak in generalities of another person's behavior. Speak directly to examples and incidences of action. So if you're talking about a specific event or occasion or action, you want to stay with that. Don't generalize to the whole thing. That's the whole thing. You want to stay away from you always or you never, right? You want to stay away from telling a person that they always do a thing or they never do a thing. You want to stay with what is actually happening, right? Nobody always does something, right? You're talking about you're painting a very broad brush that puts them in a pigeonhole and they will never get out. If that makes sense. If you use those terms, you're putting them where they're not able to move, right? And so you don't want to do that. So speak specifically to the incident that has happened. You know what? You didn't take out the garbage. These are very interesting examples, but you didn't take out the garbage yesterday. Not, you never take out the garbage. Because I'm sure at some point during the 3-4 years you guys been getting, the garbage was taken out at some point, right? Didn't stay in the house forever. So you have to be more specific. Speak specifically to what you're talking about and deal with that behavior, and don't paint a broad brush because it's not fair to that other person, right? Does that make sense? Always work to, I spoke to this a little bit, always work to be the first person to, oh my, the time's up. Always work to be the first person to apologize when a dispute arises. So I spoke to that a little bit. Be willing to apologize if there's something that you did wrong. It's okay. So that, again, that speaks to being humble. Focus on trying to discover what's right, not who's right. Right? So you want to start talking about what went right in the situation, or what's going to help you move past the situation, and not who's right. Because you guys can fight about that from that to that kingdom come, who's right, and nobody will budge on that. You want to stay away from that, because sometimes there's no point proving who's right, because you miss the whole point of the argument in the first place. So focus on what's right and not who's right. Don't cuss. Stay away from language that is derogatory, because again, you're being condescending. No name calling. Again, that often puts somebody into a category that you don't want to put them in. And it's not about labeling anybody. It's about solving the actual problem or dealing with the actual behavior. It's not about the person necessarily. Remind yourself that the other person also cares about reconciling the relationship. When you're in a loving relationship, and again, any type of relationship, you have to assume or give the person the benefit of the doubt that they want to fix this too. That they want to come together and come to some resolution. So try working from that foundation instead of assuming that they're just trying to cause trouble. That both of you are working towards reconciliation. And the last one is remind yourself to never expect the other person to fill a hole that in your life that sometimes only God can fill. This might speak to expectations that we have in our relationships, that we're expecting somebody else to do or somebody else to fulfill, and it's not going to happen because they're not able to. We have to realize that we are human. The Bible says that we fall short of His glory, and we're all sinners. So you can't expect that that other person is going to be perfect or treat you perfect all the time. And so you have to be able to be willing to understand that there are going to be problems. There are going to be situations that you're not going to be able to resolve just because we're imperfect beings. But we need to work within a space where, as I said, that we want to be Christ-like, that we want to be able to have respect for the people that we love, that we want to treat them in ways that are Christ-like at all times. And that also requires us to have a certain amount of self-reflection. When am I being wrong? Am I escalating the argument? Am I causing the problem? So it causes us to be self-reflective so that as we interact with other people, that we can treat them with love, that we can treat them in a way that we can get to a resolution in our conflicts. So I just want to end on this note, two scriptures that you should walk away with. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver, And the other one is, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. So as you think about your interactions with people, as you think about how you might have differences of opinion, also think about how you can come to resolution because of the God that you serve. And I hope that, I could have talked to conflict resolution forever and ever, but I hope that gave you a good sense of how you can fight fair and be the Christians that you want to be. Thank you.